So now if you look at the users controller, you can see the same logic we have repeated at multiple places. So this logic I have written here, the same logic I have written here, and you just tell me, does the action method responsibility is to check this thing? Is this the responsibility of the action method to check whether the user having permission to do this thing or not? No, this is not the responsibility of a action method. You have to create some kind of a attribute or some kind of additional resources. They are going to manage whether the user have permissions to access the resources or not. Within the action method, checking whether the user having permission doesn't make any sense. So basically, this is not the industry oriented approach, or this is not the best service best practices. This is not the best practices to define the claims, right? I mean, deciding whether the user having the proper claims to access the resources or not within the action method. So this is not recommended, and it is not the industry oriented approach. So what is the best approach? Best approach is policy based authorization. The best approach is policy based authorization. Sir, what do you mean by policy based authorization? So policy based authorization is an approach where access control rules are encapsulated into policies. Each policy is defined with one or more requirements, and each requirement is evaluated against the user claims. If all the requirements or all the claims policies, whatever we defined, are satisfied, then access is going to be granted. So if this is not clear, right, let us try to understand. So first of all, authentication creates the identity we have already discussed when the user is logged in. ASP.NET Core identity, right? I mean, when the user access, first of all, the authentication process is going to be takes place. If the authentication is fine, then that claims principal is going to be created. And once the claim principal is created, then what is the second step? Second step, all the claims information it is going to load from the database into this thing, right? Generally, right at the time of what I can say login. So we'll get this information from the ASP.NET user claims. See, if you are going with the default naming convention, in that case, it is going to have a ASP.NET user claims, ASP.NET role claims. But we have customized this thing into user claims table and the role claims table. So once this is done, then what we need to define? We need to define the policies. So where we need to define policies? Policies are going to be defined in the program.cs class file. Within the program.cs class file, we can define policy. That policy is going to have a set of a requirement, and each requirement is going to contain set of permissions. And if those permissions are satisfied, then the authorization process is completed. And again, once you define the policies, you need to apply these policies into the controller. For example, if you define one policy can add user, then you can apply that policy using the authorize attribute and the policy property. And to this policy property, whatever the policy you created here, that what you can apply. If this is not clear at this point of time, that is what is policies, how to create policies, how to apply policies, how it is going to be implemented, don't worry. I'm going to show you this thing practically. Clear? So let us first go ahead and define the policies, and then I will explain you this thing step by step. So policies are going to be defined within the program class file. So in the program class file, what I'm going to do, so before the build method, what I'm going to do, I'm going to define the policies. So again, whenever I'm going to define the policies, I can create policy by, I mean, I can create policy with one claim. I can create policy with multiple claim using the AND condition. I can create policy with multiple claims using the OR condition. So let us try to understand. First of all, what you need to do, this policy means it is part of your authorization process. See, authentication and authorization, these are two different things. Authentication means verifying whether the user is a valid user or not. Authorization means it is going to check whether the authenticated user can access the resources or not. And these policies are comes into the picture at the time of authorization. So using this builder.services.authorization service class, I mean service method, we can define our policies. So how you can define? By using this add policy, you can create a policy. This is a string name, whatever the name you want, you can give. So here I'm providing the policy name is user policy. And what is my policy? Now this add user policy right, required the user to have one claim. See here currently I'm using the required claim. So similar to this required claim, I can make use of a required role. How to use that role along with this policy, I will discuss after some time. But for now, let's keep focus on the policies only. So in this case, I'm creating one policy that is add user policy, and this policy requires the user to have one permission called add user. If the user doesn't have this add user claim, then and then wherever we apply this policy, then if the user doesn't have this role, then it is going to return 403 or access denied. Similarly, I have created another policy called EditUserPolicy. And for this policy, what is my requirement? The requirement is that the user must have one claim, and that claim is going to be edit user. Similarly, this is my delete user policy. The user must have the permission delete user. And this is view user policy. The user must have the right claim view user. So in this case, you can say this is the single claim policy. Single claim policy means each policy is associated with exactly one claim. Sir, how to apply multiple claim? So for multiple claim, you instead of using this require claim, first of all, what we need to do, I have to use this require assertion. So this require assertion is going to contain, it is going to combine multiple policies. If it is a single policy, I can directly call this required claim method. If you want to apply multiple policies and that policies is going to be either unconditional or condition, that is the logical grouping, then in that case, you have to use this require assertion. This require assertion going to combine multiple claims. So in this case, you can see using this require claim, what I have done, I have applied this hash claim property. See directly one claim means you can apply this one. And here, right, even right, if I think this is also possible. I think this is also possible. Policy dot required claim. No, this is not available. Okay, fine. So we are going to go with this option. So we have already discussed this hash claim method. If the current user having this claim, that's fine. If the current user having this claim, that's fine. And what type of operator is this? Or operator means whoever the user, wherever we apply this policy, whoever the user is, if that user having this either edit user per claim or manage user claim, anyone is fine because in this case we are applying the or operator, then that is going to be a valid request. Similarly, manage roles policy. What is our requirement? Our requirement is start to manage a role. The user must have all these three policies. It should have the add role, edit role, and the delete role. If the user doesn't have these policies, then he cannot access the resources. So basically, here you can see this is our single claim policy. Directly you can use the required policy, right, require claim method. For multiple policy, you have to use the require assertion. And here, multiple policies, you can use the right application, sorry, claims user object. And multiple policy, you can specify using the and or operator or the and operator. Clear? Clear or not?
Yes.
Okay, so these three options are there now. Now, once we have defined the policy, then what I need to do? I need to apply the policy. How to apply the policy? Using the policy attribute or sorry, using the policy property of the authorized attribute. So here you can apply this authorized attribute at the controller level as well as the action method level. So it doesn't make any sense to apply it at the controller level until and unless all the action methods needs the same policy. But here, mostly, right, whenever we are using policy-based authorization, it is going to be applied on the action method level. So let me go ahead and show you this thing, how you can apply the policies at the action method level. So let me go ahead. Okay. So go to the users controller and replace this thing. So I'm not going to explain all this thing. I'll show you few and you will understand this thing. See, authorized policy, few users policy. So basically what exactly it means? It means if a user having this policy, I mean, we are applying this policy. For this policy, whatever claims is required. And if you go to the program class file, view users policy means what? View users. If the user having this view user claims, then he can access this uh, index action method. And within the action method, I have removed those. Similarly, if the user, I'm applying this add user policy. For add user policy, whatever the claim is required, add user. If the user having this claim, then he can access this method. Doesn't matter what role he belongs to. So in this case, again, the create user. So here you can see edit user. So whatever the policy for edit user, this claim must have the user. So similarly, you can see this is going to be my details method. So for details method, view user policy. So again, for the details user, the user must have this claim. Next, what I have done here, delete user policy. So for delete user, what policy we have done here, the user must have this delete user claim. Next, what I have done here, you can see manage roles policy. So for managing the role policy, I'm applying this one. So this one means that the user must have these three roles to manage the user. Clear? Sorry, to manage the role. And finally, you can see this is going to be my manage claims. Manage claims means here I'm using the role-based authentication authorization, and this is manage. I'm using the role-based authorization. Clear? So basically, you have to define the policy in the program class. While defining the policy, you need to specify the condition, or right, whichever claims are required for this particular policy, and then using that policy name, right, using the policy property of the authorized attribute, you can define that policy. You can apply this authorized policy attribute at the action method level or at the control. Controller level is not recommended. Mostly you have to apply this in the action method level. Clear? Clear, guys?
Yes.
So once this is done, next what I need to do, I need to provide the option, right? Again, right? As you can see, everything, whatever we discussed, whatever we apply at the controller level, we are also doing the same thing at the application, I mean in the view level. So how we can apply policies in the view? See, it's very simple. First of all, what you need to do, you need to inject, right? Inject this authorization service. Then the question is comes to you. Then definitely the question is, sir, what is this authorization service? Why we need this authorization service? See, so in this case, what attribute we are using? Authorized attribute, and this authorized attribute only available within the user's controller. This authorized attribute is not available within the view. Means what? In the view, you cannot use that authorized attribute and nothing else. In the view, what I need to do, I need to use this authorization service, authorize async method, and using this authorize async method, whatever the roles, that is the roles, I mean the whatever the user, I mean the claims principal object, and to this claims principal object, we also need to pass the policy, whatever the policy. And this subset method means if this particular user having this particular policy assigned, then this is going to return true, else it is going to return false. So this authorization method is available within the authorization service class. So that authorization service I need to inject here, and this authorization service belongs to this particular namespace. So that namespace also we need to inject. So first of all, we are using directive for this namespace, and this namespace provide this authorization service. And here I am using @inject. So this @inject is nothing but the framework is going to inject the service class, right? Similar to, for example, if you look at this account service, in the account service, these are the service right variables we have created, and we are having this constructor. So the framework will inject the instance, and that instance we are storing here. The same thing is going to be done here. So once you define this authorization service means what? The framework will inject the authorization service instance to this variable, and then using this variable, I can call this authorize async method. And to this method, I can pass my claims principal object and whatever the policy you defined in the program class. If this user having this policy, and if you call this succeeded method, it is going to return true or false. Right, if this policy is available, return true. If not available, return false. Based on the true false, you can provide the link. Clear? So let us proceed and do this thing within our index view. So let me go ahead and modify the index view. So this is going to my index space. So this is going to my index space. Now you can see I'm using this one, user dot has claim. Why? We are implementing here claim-based authentication authorization. Now instead of that, what I'm doing here, first of all, I'm injecting this authorization service. Using this authorization service authorization method, I'm checking whether the user rate is allowed to create, whether the user allowed to edit, whether the user is allowed to perform the delete, view, and manage roles operations. And manage claims, currently we are only checking whether the user is admin or not. If the user is admin, then we are showing this manage claims options. So once we have this right Boolean variables, then we can use this Boolean variable to show and hide the corresponding quarters. Clear? Is that clear?
Yes.
Right. So with these changes, let me run the application and see whether it is working as expected or not. Okay. If you go to this user space, you can see only view details is there. Why? Because this Pranay Kumar 777 is not a admin and it doesn't have all the access. Now, at the same time, if you logged in with the Pranay Kumar 7 user, then you will see everything because this is the admin user and this user having all the permissions. So he can do whatever he wants to do. That means that claim based, that means that policy based authorization is working as expected. Clear?